I think if I were to look back at my earlier self, I would have said certain skill sets I should have enhanced or invested in earlier on. And I think that would have been more beneficial for my entire career and entrepreneurship. And it's really your mindset, like you talk about. I have that daredevil personality. I'm somewhat fearless in that regard. So why am I taking advice from people who are hyper risk sensitive and worrying about things their entire life? Like,
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Cody Cottle Show. Today, I have an incredible guest, and this episode is really special, as I say to Tony, because I was telling him before this is the first time I've ever recorded a podcast for this podcast, the Cody Cottle Show, that wasn't in the studio here in San Diego. He's my first virtual guest, but he's such a high level, high caliber guest that when Tony said yes, I was like, we're going to make an exception. We're going to do this just to get an opportunity for you to share the wisdom that you have. I mean, I remember first when I met you and you came in and spoke to Nicholas Bailey's mastermind. And that's the first time I ever saw you, and just the impact that made on my life, the things that you shared, I was like, that's so powerful. So when we were doing our social media outreach and I came across you, I was like, I'm going to throw a Hail Mary here and I'm going to see if we can get Tony on the podcast. So guys, Tony is the host of the 365 Driven podcast. It's an incredible podcast with very high caliber guests. Make sure you go subscribe. He's a business and executive coach and author of Side Hustle Millionaire. I don't know about you, but I already want to go read it right now. And founder of LS1 Tech and DV8 Motoring. Welcome to the show, Tony.
hey, Cody, good energy, man. Great intro. I'm going to try to live up to those standards as we go through this episode, but I appreciate the opportunity, brother.
Oh man, no worries. We're going to have some fun today. So one of the things I always like to ask is, what do you value most in the world?
I value the most. I would say nowadays it's time. Time is the most valuable thing. I think when you're in your 20s, you're always trying to find information and try to get more skills and more knowledge. You're chasing dollars. Most men, anyways, we're always looking for the dollars. We're always trying to grow things. And in your 30s, you've got some experience, you've got some education behind you, you've learned some things, and if you by then have started to make money, you start to multiply that. And we're always pursuing those kind of things, but we're making sacrifices on our mental health, our physical health, our relationships, all these different sacrifices because society has put this upon men that this is what you have to do to be a man. Like you have to go be the provider, the protector, and all these things, and sacrifice and make these things. And it's a bullshit story that people have perpetuated because of the situation they put themselves in, but we believe it because we have no basis of reference to counteract that. So that's what I did in my 20s and 30s is get the education. I worked as blue collar and put myself through engineering school, worked oil and gas, started businesses, doing all these different things. And in my 40s, I was more introspective and looking back retrospectively and looking back about what could I have done better, what could I have things I could have helped improve, and what sacrifices would I be unwilling to make nowadays versus that. So to me, time. And in 2015, I had a near-death experience racing cars. I hit a concrete wall at 130 miles per hour, was at the track. And after that, and realizing that I could have been gone in that instant and realizing that, dude, time is valuable and that we as a society, we waste a lot of time.
Yeah, man, what a powerful answer. And Tony, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
I'm 50.
50. Okay, so at 50, you have some wisdom, and you said something so key. I'm 29, and I grew up. My dad's been in prison my whole life, raised by a single mom, and I had that driven spirit naturally. Right, I'm driven. I'm built for entrepreneurship. I love it, and I've started to realize that that's one of the pitfalls of the grind of going for it, of wanting to do amazing things in this world. And luckily, I have great mentors around me. I have men like you in my life, and I get to learn from that. And you said time was the most valuable thing. So now being 50, if you could go back to say 25-year-old Tony, what would you say to him in reference to that? Because your mindset at 25 was way different than at 50.
The thing about what I do now compared to where I was at that age is that, yeah, I've always been driven like that. Like you said, I've always been a high performer. A lot of my friends, we talk about the underdog story and that kind of stuff. Dude, I never resonated with that story because I was the underdog, and it sounds like you were too. But I never wanted to use that as an excuse not to accomplish things. I use it as fuel for anything. And so even back then, I wanted to have the best grades. I wanted to be the best I could be in sports. I was always competitive and just willing to take these risks to get the result. And so I don't really resonate with well, I'm the underdog and everybody's counting me out. And yeah, we all had bullies, or we were the bully. Let's be truth, So I think if I were to look back at my earlier self, I would have said certain skill sets I should have enhanced or invested in earlier on. And I think that would have been more beneficial for my entire career and entrepreneurship. And it's really your mindset, like you talk about. So, going back when I was young, I have a skin condition called vitiligo. So I'm literally like covered in white spots. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but half my face is covered in spots and things like that. There's really bright lights on here. You can't probably really see it right now. But when you have a skin condition, especially as prevalent and it's all over your body, you grow up around people who are just curious and they always ask you, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with your skin? Why do you look like that? And you got to realize that when someone's got a disability or something that's really like out in front, literally, you kind of start to wonder like, what's wrong with me? I don't know what's wrong with me. So that kind of forced me into hiding and not wanting to be in cameras or standing on stages and things like that. So I had to be really good at being an operator in the background, kind of being like the MVP that would win all the trophies that no one really knew about. So I built companies and I hid behind the logo and things like that. So I would give my advice to my earlier self is to not worry about what other people are going to say and the fear of the judgment and the fear of criticism. Because although most people will say like, I fear failure, we don't fear failure. We fail every day. Like the smallest things, you eat the wrong meal, you failed. Your shoelace comes untied, you failed. You stumble when you're walking, you failed. You didn't call back that follow-up, you failed. Like we get over failure pretty quickly, but what we're worried about is what are people or potential critics going to say about our failures? And as soon as you can start to realize like you don't need to worry about what other people are going to say because you're never going to make everybody happy and it's impossible, literally impossible to make everybody like you. So don't even try that and quit giving 95% of your attention to the 5% of the haters and the critics and start serving the 95% of the people that actually tolerate you or at least accept you or support you, because those are the ones that you need to be focused on. But we get it always backwards because we're so worried about what people think or say. So I would have just told the earlier Tony to learn some communication skills, go do public speaking, hire a speaking coach, things like even in my 20s. I wish I would have done that at 18 instead of my 40s. And so become a more effective communicator, learn a little bit about leadership and be able to put yourself out there and fade the critics.
That's such a good answer, and I love how you went deep on that because I even wrote down like skill sets, right? Because you mentioned I would have told my younger self to go master some skill sets sooner, and so communication, that was a big one you hit on. Is there any other skill sets that you would encourage a listener of this show to master as soon as possible?
Yeah, start surrounding yourself with people that are where you want to arrive at or are actually going in the same direction. You'll find that we hear this thing about circle matters. It's absolutely true. And if you need some examples of that, I used to define success differently in every phase of my life. I grew up lower middle class. We had the crappiest house in the crappiest neighborhood in my town. Parents lived there just because they had a good public school system. So I get all that. And if I'm a car guy, so a lot of the things I talk about is racing cars and building cars and things like that. So here's an analogy. Maybe you guys will relate to this. Well, we tend to desire things that we can afford, right? So maybe when I was broke and back when I was a kid, like we wanted to put big 18-inch woofers in our mini trucks and Honda Civics and shit like that. But you're looking at like a Honda Civic and you're like, man, I'd love to have one of those one day because it could put big 15s and make a wall and whatever, like mini truck, same thing. But these are all like back then $6,000 or $7,000 cars, but you desired that and you'd buy the magazines for that and you would study that car because it was within reach. And you start realizing how do you apply that to your whole life? Because now I drive cars that are six figures and been on magazine covers and stuff like that. And your taste will increase with your income and your experience. And you start to realize like, why do we create these false artificial ceilings in the things that we would desire, whether it's a lifestyle or a material possession or profession? And it's really based around our current definition of success, which is derived from your family and your friends. And if you don't believe me, especially if you're one of the older people watching or listening to this, if you start looking around at your friend circle, and maybe you're the successful person in that circle, which hopefully you're not. You don't want to be that person that they're just filling full of hot air because, you're going to realize like, am I living a life of success based on the definition that my parents created for me or my friends created for me? Why do I define success this way? And I'm not just talking about financial success. Like, what is your fitness level? What is your relationship level? What's your spiritual level? Like, all these things are equally important. But a lot of times you set these artificial ceilings that shouldn't even exist based on the people that you surround yourself with. So that's why it's very important to surround yourself with people where you want to go, or at least people traveling in that right direction, because you'll hold each other accountable. And you may think that you have a big dream and you'll put it out there and be like, bro, that's all you got? Like you could do that next year. Like what's next? Like, come on, man, step it up.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm glad you hit on that because, I grew up in Michigan and it was like a smaller town. And very limited mindsets in my family as well. And I'm curious your thoughts on this too, because for one, within that environment of that small town, I was able to find some people more successful myself, and I had a mentor named Wally that thought bigger, that began to rub off on me so much so when I went home, started to become self-aware to what I wasn't self-aware of before, which is that limited small thinking. And I knew I wanted to go farther in my life, and just, I don't even know, I don't like the word like say to do bigger things, but in a sense that I wanted to really live out my purpose using the gifts that God has given me. And one of the ways that I found an outlet to get mentors and expand my circle before I could get in the room with the people was through content. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, because some of my first mentors were YouTube channels. They were podcasts like this. They were books that I read. They were and this is, I'm young, but I listened to Earl Nightingale tapes and Tony Robbins tapes because the mentor I had tapes, and he gave me his old tapes and I would listen to them. And I had to go buy from like a garage sale to even listen to them. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Man, mentorship is the most important thing that you'll ever invest in. And it can come in the form of teachers or people that have wisdom or people that have experience of things. But you really shouldn't be taking advice on people's specific subjects of things that they haven't mastered, or at least attempted and failed, because there's a lot of lessons and failures in specific subjects. But again, it goes back to like our parents. A lot of times our parents feed us with best intention advice. They want us to do things, but maybe they haven't experienced building a 7 or 8 figure or 9 figure business, or they haven't put themselves on social media or created content. So they're going to give you advice based on their own level of risk tolerance. I happen to be a daredevil. I can kind of tell you're probably that same type of personality.
Oh yeah,
So
I
I
grew
was
up
always the
racing
kid
dirt
that,
bikes,
dude, I
snowboarding.
was I was
I
willing
did
to put the extra
everything.
brick under the ramps, do crazy shit, jump over my friends, jump off the roof into the swimming pool. Like, I have that daredevil personality. I'm somewhat fearless in that regard. So why am I taking advice from people who are hyper risk sensitive and worrying about things their entire life? Like, that's not the person I need to learn from, right? I need to learn from some that maybe has an equal risk tolerance, because that's even goes for investing in stocks and things like that. Like, your risk tolerance is going to be different, and it's something you can change. So if you're like always worried about things, like, go confront your fears, go confront your challenges, and you'll start to grow a higher risk tolerance if you, by doing so, instead of hiding from those things. So, mentors and finding the right mentors, and you should have multiple mentors. It's not just one, because no one person has all the right answers, but maybe you have somebody that's in the fitness and the nutrition space. Maybe you have someone that's in the business side, someone that's a content creator, the director, the creator. So you have all these different people you learn from, because the number one reason we hire a coach or work with someone that's training is mistake avoidance. When you think about it, like, what is the reason we hire someone? It's mistake avoidance. Nobody really wants a coach. Like, think about that. No one wants a coach. They want the result, and they want the result as efficiently as possible without making a bunch of costly mistakes and time
Yeah,
and money.
that's
So
so
it's mistake
powerful. And
avoidance.
what advice would you give to somebody that's like, I want to get in the room with guys like you?
There's a weird thing that we see in society, that everybody's so ready to go spend $50,000 to $100,000 for a college education, and that's like norm. It's like socially acceptable. I mean, your parents, when you were young, would hang around with other parents, and they would brag or humble brag about where little Susie or Jimmy's going to go to college, and they kind of wear the jerseys like their kid, and they put the stickers on their car, and so they're all like gung ho to go spend $50,000 for a 4-year degree, or 100,000 at some private universities. But it's so weird, because you're paying to learn essentially from people who have never accomplished the things that you would like to. If we're talking entrepreneurship, especially, you're paying to learn from most of the people who have never applied what they're learning. So they're professing things to you, but they have never applied it, and they've never failed and never learned the lessons. They're reading textbooks that were written 10 years ago that don't even apply to today. So a lot of things change nowadays, especially on the internet and online businesses, that the college universities can't even keep up with that in their curriculum. But you're willing to go pay $50,000 to learn from that. So here's where it gets weird, right? So that's socially acceptable. But what if someone was going to come up to you and go, hey man, that mentor on the other side of town has all these things that you would like to achieve. He's already owning the business that you would like to learn. You want to go get that skill set. Why don't you go work for him for free for a couple years? And most people would be like, oh, I am not working for free. I would never work for free. Like, no way. Guys, like, do you realize, like, before man started having these universities created, it was apprenticeship. And those apprenticeships, You were working for free because you were learning a skill or a knowledge base that you could apply for the entire rest of your life and have the fruits and the benefits from doing that. So apprenticeship was free. You learned from the masters at what they did, and then you applied that and went out on your own eventually, and you had your own business doing the same thing or better. So it's so weird that we will go pay $50,000 to learn from people who have never accomplished something, and that's okay. But you wouldn't work for free. Like, that's actually saving you $50,000, learning it from actual people that have accomplished far and beyond what the people at universities are teaching. So if you want to be around mentors, start figuring out what value you can create for them just to get your foot in the door. Maybe you see somebody that needs help creating content, for example. Reach out to them. Hey, man, I would love to have you as a client. I'm going to work for you for free for a month. If you can just have a meeting with me once a month for an hour or so and answer all my questions, I'm going to do this stuff for you for free for a year. How's that? And one, you get a person that's a high net worth person that's got a little bit of a reputation as a client, right? That's a good way to get the next client that will pay you. And two, you're learning things, you're downloading things from them. And if you build a relationship with them, that could be your mentor for life, even if you're not creating that content. So, get around people that you can help, even if you don't have the money. And if not, if they have a course or if they have a group or a mastermind or something, join those things. That's the easiest way to get quick access to those people, because we do pay attention to more people that join your group and participate in the things that we create for you guys.
Yeah, that's good. And whatever we want to get in proximity to, you got to find a way to honor that and bring value to it. Yeah. I remember, like, in my younger years, I've been working since I was 13 years old. And I would always go work for people. I got into real estate in South Carolina, and he was a number 2 real estate agent. He'd been in the business for 35 plus years. And I went to him and I said, I want to work for you. And he was like, no, I'm not hiring you. I don't need anybody. I was like, no, I'll do whatever you ask. I kept going up to him, and he's like, fine, show up tomorrow with a suit on at 7 a.m. and I'll have you called expired listings. And if you book some listing appointments for me, I'll pay you this. I was like, cool. So every day I showed up. I didn't know how to cold call. I didn't know how to do all that sales stuff, but I showed up in a suit that I couldn't afford, that I put on a credit card, and I made cold calls every single day, and that got my foot in the door. And what was really cool is his office was 10 feet away from me, and his door was open, and I heard everything he said on the phone, and I listened to his sales conversations. I listened to how he ran his business, and I began to catch some of what, and he wasn't like a direct teacher. Like, I didn't get direct mentorship. It was more like I was just lucky enough to be in the office and hear what he was doing and go to lunch with him and sometimes sit on a listing appointment. But that allowed me to get in real estate when I was 21, did okay in that. And then I moved on to other things in entrepreneurship. But I think about that, and the social media world is amazing what we can do to impact lives. But there's also this false hope of instant gratification. I need to be as successful as you right now, Tony. I'm 25, I'm making content, and I should be able to build an 8-figure business. But there's a lot more to business than that, right?
Yeah, and being around someone like you learned from, being around successful people, you learn how to think. You learn how they think. Different way that successful people think, especially about money. A lot of times we think about this. When I was young, it was always told, don't talk about money. That's kind of a taboo thing, and it makes people uncomfortable, and people will think you're bragging and stuff like that. So there was always this social stigma. Usually it happens in middle class and lower, and that's what I realized. Like in the middle class and the lower, my friends in that level, you didn't talk about money. Like, you go have dinner or spend the night and things like that with your friends, and their parents never talked about money. Maybe they bitched about how many bills and stuff they had. It was more like the negative side of money, right? And then I had some rich friends, and I'd go have dinner with them or maybe go out on their boat and stuff like that. And they're talking to their kids about money and investments and how to scale. And I'm paying attention. Like, I'm listening to their parents more than they are, because they grew up in that. And they're kind of like, that's just my parents. Like, are always talking about this. But I saw a distinct difference from the upper and the higher wealthy people, that they actually are very comfortable teaching their children about money and how to grow money and how to build businesses and do these kind of things. So why is that? Why does the people that need the money the most don't talk about money? Like, that's just so it's just like these mindsets that are terrible, and they perpetuate you and keep in the same socioeconomic level for history, right? So just to be around those people and you start to think different and you start to see things as investments versus expenses and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's so good. So I love that. So I want to move on to something that we talked about before the show. And I asked Tony, I said, Tony, what's a superpower if you have one? And you said something really powerful, and I might mess it up a little bit, but you said something along the lines of you're able to see in others like what they don't see in themselves. And I think
Yeah.
that was really profound. Can you expand upon that? Because I do believe that is a gift.
I get this from my mom. So my mom's a Japanese immigrant and she worked her entire career in the public school systems as a cafeteria worker. So when I was young and especially in high school, my mom she loved everybody. She loved all the kids. She didn't judge anybody. She, loved the bad kids, the good kids, the band kids, the jocks, whatever, like loved them all. And they all loved her. I remember sometimes I'd be hanging around talking to my mom and she's giving me a chocolate chip cookie or something between classes. And then she'd always try to introduce me to people, and like they weren't in my like my group, and sometimes they were just weird. And she's like, "Oh, I want you to meet Susan. Like she's really nice." I'm like, "Mom, like you're trying to hook me up. That's kind of weird. Like I'm like don't do that, Mom. That's weird, right?" And so I thought it was kind of weird at first, especially when you're young and you don't understand it. But I started to realize that I have the same type of vibe where I look at people and I try not to be. I'm very optimistic and I try to see the benefit of the doubt, but I also see what their potential is. And that was even when I look back, when I started to realize that, probably really in my 30s, I was like, man, it's always been there. Like the clues have always been there. And this is why certain people make better teachers, certain people make better coaches and things like that, because we do want to pour back into people. And it goes back to even when I was a kid, dude, when I was first skateboarding, because I've recently taken that back up in my 50s. But in junior high, for example, like I would be relentless about practicing skateboard tricks and jumping off ramps and half pipes and quarter pipes. And man, you eat shit a bunch of times and you get up and you keep doing it and you keep doing it and you keep doing it until you master these tricks. And most people would be happy with that level, just mastering a trick. But I was more excited about mastering it and then teaching somebody else how to do it. And so I had a lot of friends that were skaters and they'd have a lot of self doubt and they're worried about falling and all these things. And we'd work through that. And eventually they're being able to do the tricks. They get excited about that. They get the same result. And so even when I was a kid, I loved to learn new things, apply it until I could master it, and then teach it. Because I don't think that true success exists unless you have a succession plan to be able to pass that experience or that information on. So I started seeing this all through my life, and even in the corporate space where I was bringing in and younger mentoring the younger engineers and project people. Then, it wasn't part of my job description. I've always done that. I always looked at people and go, hey, I think you can do this a little bit better. Like let's step this up and work on that. And if you did this and that, you get this different result. And so I kind of mentored people for 20 years. And so when I come across people and they go, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to achieve that, it's like awesome, man. Let's work on that. And you have to get through all the mental roadblocks and the self-doubt and worrying about the critics and things like that, because everybody's got a story, everybody's got some trauma in their life that kind of keeps them from doing what they truly want to do. Or maybe they're going down a career path that wasn't designated to them. It was assigned to them from their parents or their grandparents. And so I can see what people are potential wise, and nothing irritates the shit out of me more than when I see people waste their potential, because I can see what they're capable of, but they have no clue and they really don't even believe what's possible for themselves. And it eats me up. And I used to waste my time trying to help all these people and give them advice. And you'd see them year after year. They got the same situation, same bitching about their job, same fucked up relationships. Like, it's like, dude, like I gave you advice 2 years ago to fix this. Like, why haven't you done anything? Oh, I don't have any time. And just that shit. Like, so as a coach, now I get compensated to do that. I get paid to go on stages and do things. I'm now able to focus on the people that have raised their hands and said, hey, I need help and I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to be coached. So now I can pour into the people that actually want to receive the information and that will actually do something with it. And I can largely, I hate to say it, but I will ignore the people that aren't ready to change, because I can see the potential in everybody. But those people that aren't willing to change, the best analogy I can think about, dude, is like you love little puppies, but you can't save every puppy in the pound.
Yeah, that's so good. And that kind of is like good segue to what you said earlier too, like with the spots that you had growing up and feeling like something was wrong with you, you had to overcome your own insecurities to like put
Yep.
yourself out there. And it sounds like, you had certain beliefs in yourself, but that was one that you lacked, right? Like having the personal brand that you have now, speaking on the stages, doing podcasts like this, it sounds like you had to overcome some things to get where you're at. But then I like what you said, because you talked about, and guys, those listening to the show, watching the show right now, Tony just dropped a nugget that you might have missed. You have mentors in life and people that you want to get in proximity to, but you also have to think from their seat. Who do they want to invest in? They want to invest in the people that are hungry for the wisdom and the knowledge, that are willing to raise their hand, invest, show up, get in proximity, work for free. And I think that that's something that a lot of people miss. I see two people right now, Tony, in this conversation. I see there's a person that knows they're capable of greatness. They might not see it all yet, but and they want more, but they're afraid, they're insecure, and maybe they lack a little bit of belief to take action. And then I see a person that they don't believe in themselves at all, and they have no motivation to take action. What advice would you give to each of them?
The person that can believe in what's possible, just take the next step. Everybody waits around for the perfect time, and I'll do that later, and someday I'm going to do this. Like, if you use the word someday, it's terrible, because you can use that forever. I always tell people, like, hey, show me your calendar. Which day of the week says someday on it? Like, there's no someday on the calendar, so that means never in reality. So just put things on the calendar. If you're talking about, hey, I want to start a business and quit my job, okay, what date are you going to quit your job? I gotta put a date on it? Yeah, why not? That's a goal. If that's your real goal and you're really honest about yourself, like, is that 6 months from now? Is that 2 weeks from now? Is it today? Like, what is it? Like, let's put it on the calendar. We start working towards that, right? If you're lacking the confidence, it's because you're not keeping promises to yourself, and you're not keeping promises to other people. That's the reality. So if you really want to build confidence, just make promises and do what you say you're going to do. Like, if you say I'm going to show up, like, show up. If you say I'm going to do this and take this certification, do it. And if you're lacking the internal accountability, if you don't have a history of following through, which is a big problem for most people, you're not alone. Okay, I'm very disciplined, and I have high levels of accountability, and I understand that I'm not normal. That's abnormal, but I try to teach this. It's a skill you can learn. It's not something you're born with, but it starts out with these little bitty steps at a time. And if you can keep those promises, you start to stack wins. That's where true confidence comes from. It's from keeping promises to yourself and other people. And then soon enough, you become confident, because you go, hey, I say I'm going to do it, and then I did it, and then here's the result. The result may not be good or bad, but you did it. You did the action, you learned the lesson, or you got the result, right? And so the more you do that, the stronger your confidence becomes, and you don't become the bullshit artist. And here's another, like related to that. You've probably seen the stupid meme that people will share on Instagram once in a while. It irritates the crap out of me. It says, hustle hard in silence and let your work speak for you.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
I hate that phrase.
I hate
that
too.
phrase, because why you put that out there, hustle hard in silence, the reality behind that is you don't have fucking discipline. So you're going to go try something without anybody knowing, so they can't hold you accountable. Let's say it's a fitness journey or starting a business. You don't even tell your best friends or your families, and it gives you the convenient escape door to quit without anybody knowing and holding you accountable. That's why you hustle hard in silence. So all that is some bullshit. So until you have internal accountability and a proven record of following through, don't do things in silence. Go find somebody that's an accountability partner or an accountability group or a coach that's going to be like, dude, here's the tasks we came up with. Here's the dates we agreed on you doing these tasks. Where are you at? And if you're not there, you just need to call yourself out, like, dude, I'm not accountable. I need to go step that up. So that's how you're going to get the result and the confidence. So don't hustle hard in silence until you've proven time and time again that you can get the results in silence.
That's so good. And how you hit on the accountability, the discipline, the consistency. I see so many people that have big dreams, talent, the gifts to do it, even the great idea, but they lack the discipline, the accountability, and the consistency of showing up and doing the small efforts compounded over time to see the result that they're desiring in their life. It sounds like you've gotten pretty good at mastering the small things, which leads to the big things. I was listening to another podcast this morning, and he talks about like what you do gradually will create the suddenly. And I thought that was so powerful, because it's like it's the gradual little things every single day that create the sudden result. And everyone sees the sudden result, but they'll see the gradual digging you had to do to get there.
There's no get rich quick. There's no fast acceleration to the result. I mean, everything that you see people getting a result from, you're not really seeing all the back end work or the years and effort they put in or the things that the skills they've learned along the way that they've polished to enhance their ideas or their business. We don't really know somebody's history, their education level, the experiences they had in their life to create that result. So you only know yourself. And when you look at a result that someone has, you have to ask yourself, what is the skill set that's required to attain that? What is the work ethic that I need to have for that? What are the identifying tasks and durations that are required? What are the resources needed? Do I need to have financial resources or personnel to be able to achieve that? So I think a lot of times people have a defeatist attitude about their big dreams because they think it's just a giant dream. And the problem I see with that with entrepreneurship is that you can start a small business. You don't like everybody's got a dream business, like this heyday, like knock it out of the park, big $1 billion, whatever. Like you can have that. If you think that you're going to start with that, that's a huge mistake that most people think about. Like if you're thinking about starting a company that needs $1 million in capital and you don't even have $10,000 in capital, a lot of people would be like, well, I guess this entrepreneurship thing is just not for me. I don't have $1 million, so I'm just going to go find another job and give up my dream. But a real entrepreneur finds a way. They go, hey, what if I start a company with that $10,000 and it does really well, and I grow that for a couple years and I sell that for $500,000, and then I build another company in the middle there that spins off, or maybe I do some investments, or do some flips in real estate, whatever, and I can grow. And then eventually you have that $1 million, and maybe you can go start that $1 million dream business 3 businesses in. So we will always find a way. We will never find an excuse.
That's so good. Most of the guys that I hang around that are doing some really cool things with some big companies now never started with that business. Typically, they started with
No.
some small wins that compounded. They made some money. Maybe they invested in real estate, this or that. They pulled equity. They were able to do, and they had the street cred. They had the
Mhm.
credibility to know that they could do it, which formed the partnerships for them to be where they're at now. But I do have some questions for you that I think will be powerful to get into. One
Okay.
question that just came up in my mind, and I think this is cool to hear for the audience. It's Tony, how'd you make your first million?
My first million was operating, actually. It wasn't through the exit. So I've actually built a online business for automotive community, General Motors performance cars. So Chevrolet, Cadillac, Pontiac back then when they were in. And we grew that business to about 400,000 people. We had their basically their registered members, so we had sponsorship and ad dollars, and that company was profiting about 400,000 a year. I owned that about 5 years, and then we sold it for a few million to a private equity company in 2007. So, the first million was a combination of working in oil and gas, low six-figure career at that point, and then making about $400,000 a year from my automotive hobby business.
Which leads perfect into your book, Side Hustle Millionaire. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Side Hustle Millionaire, what someone can expect to get out of the book, and maybe even just a few key lessons from it. Because it sounds like you were working a job and then you built a side
Mhm.
hustle, and that's how you made the first million.
Absolutely. Yeah, I built, through the engineering process I was working in, I learned a lot about systems and processes and leadership and making non-emotional money decisions because I was working with some big numbers in the corporate space. And so I was able to learn these things from my corporate job and apply those to small business. And my job was really demanding at that point in my career. And I was working offshore and I was working on international projects. So a lot of times I would just disappear for 28 to 30 days on these shift rotations. And sometimes I didn't have internet. So I'd literally just disappear from the map. And, so much so that my friends back then would say, think that was like an international spy or something because I would just disappear and then come back a month later. But I had to be able to build these online businesses that didn't require my presence. And you do that with processes and systems and people. So I, built these things, grew out the platforms, learned how to do graphic design. I learned how to code and build my own websites. And, I was really curious about always learning new skills like that. And eventually I had enough money coming in, I could hire people to manage those things. I had staff in place to manage it. And so I got to really use my websites as a consumer and see what the complaints were and things like that we could always fix things and stay ahead of issues like server speeds and stuff like that, or software patches or security issues. And so I got to use it as a consumer level and I got to enjoy it. And it really only took about 2 hours a week for me to manage that 7-figure business. That was like my creative outlet, and it paid for my car hobbies and my racing and things like that. And I never intended to make millions of dollars from that. It was just something I really enjoyed. And I wanted a cool place for people to talk about cars and racing and become better drivers and make their cars look cooler. And it became the number one in its market share. And then we copied that market share and made performancetrucks.net, which also grew to about 180,000 registered members, another seven-figure business brand. We sold that one as well. So I was able to duplicate that kind of effort through the corporate career. And yeah, the Side Hustle book, that came out in 2018 as a request from a lot of people that just kept coming up to me for about the 15 years. I helped 12 different employees and staff members of mine build 7, 8, and 9-figure companies over the last
Come on.
15 years. And so they kept coming to me for advice. And I was like, dude, I'm not a business coach. They're like, yeah, but you're a mentor and you're teaching me this stuff. And so I started really thinking about that. And I was like, hey guys, I went on social media, actually on Facebook in 2017. I said, hey guys, I'm thinking about writing a book because I was testing my market, right? I was like, I'm thinking about writing a book. What would you like to learn from me? Back then, I may have had like 2,000 friends, right? But they knew, a lot of them had known me for 20 years. They said, we want you to teach us about business. And so I was like, all right, because I was already leaning that way at that time. And here's the weird thing about that book, dude. Initially, I was like, well, I'm learning all these things at a high level, the modern day stuff, all these efficiency stuff, and automations and all that. It's like I'm going to make this high level book, and so as an operating entrepreneur, you kind of think like that. You always want to teach the latest and the greatest, the things that excite you. But I had the wisdom to go back to that social media audience, and I said, hey, okay, I'm going to write a book about business. And then the next question is, what would you like to learn in this book? That's the key. And I thought they were going to ask me about a bunch of high level stuff. And that would have served my ego at the time. But all the stuff that people were asking were very basic level things. How do you name the company? What do you get the brand? How do you build a website? How do you find funding? What's an LLC or an S Corp? How do you do marketing? Like, how do you do the accounting? How do you calculate which business idea is the best one for me? Like, these are very basic entrepreneurship questions. And someone who would have had a big ego at that time would have been like, I'm not going to write the beginner book. Like, I'm 20 years past that and I'm just way too cool. But no, dude, I know how to test my market. And I was like, dude, if that's what they want, I'm going to try to answer every one of those questions in this book the best I can so that they have this resource available. So it's literally the book from going from your ideas, like zero or negative dollars, to your first seven figures. That's the kind of the layout, is the 0 to 1 million in revenue and sales. It's kind of the basis of that book.
That's so good. I love that. And there's so many people that are in that place right now. And you hit on something
Thousands,
really key.
thousands.
Yeah, I mean, so many people are social media's definitely changed things. I think every single person has the ability to be a business owner if they want to. Most of them
Everyone
don't
does.
understand they're going to get into it and get punched in the face a lot, and they're going to have to keep getting up and keep going.
Yeah.
But if you can overcome that, I believe anybody can be successful in business, truly. It'll take a while to figure out your lane and carve out the right product, the right service, build the right systems, the right processes, get the right people in place. But I think anyone can do that. So that's powerful. I really want to dive into, you seem like you have a lot of high level knowledge on process, systems, people. So you have the beginning entrepreneur that's just wanting to get started. Go buy the book, Side Hustle Millionaire. They'll get you your first million. What about the guy like me? It's like, all right, Tony, I got process, I got systems, I got people, I got product, I'm making some good money, but I want to go to that next level. We're hitting ceilings. What would you tell me to optimize my business to take it to that next tier?
That's a multi-answered question because I don't understand where your business is at or what the bottlenecks
Right. So you
are,
don't
where
have the
the
nitty gritty, I
inefficiencies
guess,
are,
but
and but I'll give you general answers. So
okay.
that kind of is the answer. You start to look at each of your systems. So maybe you have your lead gen and your marketing system. You've got your fulfillment system if you're an e-com, or you've got your logistics from like raw goods and supplies coming in and shipping things going out. So you got all these different systems that are really just departments. If you think about it, most people think about, like, I know what department of a company is or a division of a company. Well, those are your systems in a small business, and each of them can operate independently, especially if there's specific employees or staff assigned to each of those roles. Until then, you're the guy wearing all the hats, but you should still have those systems defined, even if it's all you right now. When you start to turn up the marketing, let's say you increase your ad spend and you start to get more leads coming in, and you're like, oh, awesome, because that's the number one problem most people have, right? But then you start to crash your system because you can't fulfill it. You can't get the product out fast enough, and you can't build the product fast enough, or your raw goods is taking longer to deliver, so you can't do anything. So you create these little bottlenecks, and that, scaling is simply looking at each of these little things that are the thing that you got to tweak to improve. Because if you just go turn the floodgates on in the marketing thing and you can't fulfill, like, you're going to leave people with a bad experience. They're never going to come buy from you again. You're going to get a bad reputation. So, you almost want to have a better fulfillment than the marketing initially, but learn how to like limit the amount of people that can consume things. So you can create these little throttles and, these little relationship kind of things between different departments. Like, hey, when it gets here, raise the price, because it slows things down on this end. Supply versus demand, especially if you're in a business that's not a commodity that everybody can have access to in different ways. There's a lot of answers. It's very technical, and everybody's going to have a different thing. But you try to break the system. We even do this in the corporate, in the Fortune 500 world. We try to break the system. In the coding and the online space, we try to break the website, right? That's how you test things. That's how beta tests work. And when it breaks, it identifies where the problem is, the bottleneck is, and then you go all in and fix that with your resources, or you make some changes to increase the efficiency. That maybe there's different ways to do things to improve that. So scaling a company is really just breaking things and trying to fix things, or if you get really good at it, trying to stay ahead of things, because you're watching certain indicators that go, hey, when this thing got to this level, like this thing crashed last time, so we need to make sure we can extend that level somehow before this thing crashes again. So you're just always staying ahead of those kind of things.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you for that. I know that was a broad question because pressure definitely does reveal the cracks. And I've had that
Yeah.
happen because I'm like in marketing and stuff too. And lead gen is probably what I've put most of my time on and gotten really good at. But I've brought such an influx in of business that stuff broke inside of
Yep.
the company for fulfillment. And it was like, oh, wow, we weren't set up to handle the amount of volume of business that we just took in. Internal SOPs needed to be dialed in more. Hiring for positions wasn't done the right way. So, like, even expanding the workforce to handle the work, it was like, oh, wow, I'm spending all my time because we didn't have a good system in place to train the new people for the process. So that's some wisdom right there. And I might be just hard headed. I feel like I've had to go through it all and just knock my head on the wall just to get to where I'm at. But
Yeah.
mentors have been around me the whole time, masterminds, coaches, and I think that's helped cut the learning curve down for sure.
Yeah, most people out there on the internet, they hear the word scale because it's kind of a buzzy word nowadays, unfortunately. And it's not really scale that most companies are suffering. It's leads, it's marketing. Yeah, scale is like when you get into the nitty gritty, you're breaking things and you're refining your process, and it's something you can actually create, something that you can duplicate. When you build a business that has proper written processes and systems and has the right people and the positions and the jobs and the roles and responsibilities defined, and how the cash flow is operated through the system from start to beginning. That's something you can take as a money machine. You created a machine that makes money. That's your business. If you could duplicate those kind of things, that's how you scaled the business, right? That's how you work about it. But most people talk about scale, but what they're really missing is the marketing part.
Yeah, that's so good. There's a topic I want to hit on before we wrap up here. AI, artificial intelligence. Let's talk about it. It's hot right now. It's a buzzword right now. A
Yeah.
lot of people are innovating with AI. Tony, I would love to hear your thoughts around AI as a whole, from a macro, where you kind of see it in the world, just your opinion, your thoughts on it. And then also from terms of business, are you using it? Are you leveraging? What's your thoughts on it?
I'm a big technology nerd, so I love it. I think that, it's really cool to play with. And anybody that's out there boo-hooing AI, they probably still have a cassette player in their car. Let's be real. Like they're probably still watching VCR tapes and sad about Blockbuster not being in business anymore. So we can bitch and complain about change and technology, but realize it's inevitable and it's always going to change. Like, technology is always going to march forward, no matter how many naysayers complain about it. So you can either learn to accept it or learn to embrace it. And I think that the AI itself is the next big leap. I mean, it's, to me, that's just like the internet coming out. And it is that big. And people that want to downplay it and go, oh, AI is going to steal my job and AI is going to replace artists and AI is, maybe it could. That just means that you're probably not a good performer. You haven't built a strong enough brand or an artist reputation, or you haven't increased your skill set enough to stay ahead of that. Because again, think of all the technology things that we've had. It's replaced a lot of careers in the past. I mean, these cell phone devices that we carry, how many jobs did this replace compared to being able to have a guy that's videoing you, have a guy that's at a movie studio, putting you on a screen that can reach thousands, if not millions of people. It's like all these positions have condensed into this technology that we look at every day. So that's what technology does. And so when I think about AI, it's really just like a smart friend. It's like having a conversation with someone who has every piece of the internet in their brain. Imagine if you had a friend like that. If you had a true friend that you could call up anytime you want to 24/7 and ask them anything about anything and they had an answer, like that's a pretty damn valuable friend if you understand that. Like that's a pretty good resource for you and it's available to you and you have these things on your phone with, chat GPT apps and things like that. And so where I think it gets muddy is when people try to rely on it to create their content. I think that's stupid because we can all see when things are kind of written in AI speak. It's not refined yet, and that's why a lot of people make fun of it. And they got a lot of critics in AI because they're like, "Oh, I can tell it's AI," and yeah, you can. But this is like chapter one of chapter 1,000 to come. Like we are literally at the infancy of it. It's like a toddler right now and has so much capability. Imagine how powerful this stuff is going to be in 10 years. And in technology years, 10 years is going to be like a generation, several generations away, right? In the next 2 years, you're going to see some huge breakthroughs and a lot of improvements just in the next 2 years. Because as technology improves, that window of improvements gets smaller and smaller as we go. So, I'm excited about seeing where it's going to go. I'm not worried about AI taking over the world and exterminating all the people. I mean, we're doing that pretty good ourselves. Humans have been exterminating humans pretty well for a long time. So got that covered. Maybe it won't replace those jobs. Yeah. How do you use it in business? I think what the best use of AI today is using it as a creative spark. So a lot of us that are creators, you get in these kind of moods where you just don't really feel too creative, or maybe you're overworked and you go, man, I got to create some blog, or I got to write some content. I got to come up with some video content that I'm going to put out there, and you don't really feel creative. You can go to AI, Chat GPT, and say, hey, I'm a business coach. Give me 50 titles for potential YouTube videos that I can create. And then it'll spit out 50 titles of business coach related topics. And then you can read those and go, you know what? I can actually do a video on that topic, that little hook right there. That's pretty cool. Let me do that one. And so from that 50, you could say, hey, from these 50 titles, which do you believe is the five of these that's going to be able to create the most virality or have the biggest hook? And it's going to tell you, like, we believe these five are the best ones. And you go, okay, cool. Those titles are kind of long. They're long sentences. You say, give me a hook title that's only 5 words long for each of those. And it'll refine those 5 down to 5-word sentences or less to create your hook. And then you go, hey, I kind of like those 5 things, but make it a little bit more humorous. Can you revise those 5-word things to be humorous? And it will rewrite those to be humorous. And now you actually have some pretty cool, catchy titles that you can use on your YouTube or your Instagram. So it's that creative process. You still have to go create the content. You still have to be the interesting person. You still have to get out of your way to go do that. But it's a spark of creativity that is like, oh, cool. Like this is doing a lot of research for me without me having to dig through all that.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. I love how you broke that too down with the prompts with like Chat GPT, right? And how you want to layer
Mm-hmm.
deeper and a layer deeper and a layer deeper. Because I think there's so much potential. And like you said, this is like Chat GPT right now is like iPhone 2.0. Like we're on like 14 or
For sure.
15 right now. And where this is going is it's going to be gnarly and insane. And I just see it as such a efficiency and optimization inside of businesses. I'm actually pretty excited, Tony, about like where things are going. You talked about like having that friend that knows everything. I'm pretty sure we'll all have an AI assistant in the future. I mean, we kind of already do. Like they got ChatGPT as an iPhone app now. You literally kind of already have the assistant with you or on your computer. But I think it's going to go to an interface like I think of Tony Stark, like with Jarvis. And I
Yeah.
really think we're actually going to hit that point in the next decade.
Way sooner. I'm going to give that 3 years. I think that it's accelerated. I mean, just AI in itself is going to accelerate. And a lot of people will laugh. They'll prompt something and the AI will give kind of a half correct answer and they'll criticize that. But those people don't realize it's called artificial intelligence. Like if you teach it the right answer, it will learn the right answer. So the next time someone asks that same question, it'll probably have a revised answer because it's learning as it goes. And so it's not like this, it's always going to be a wrong answer thing.
Yeah, it's only going to keep getting smarter. And I
Yeah.
think those that are in business that are looking at this like, okay, how do I leverage this, right? Like I imagine I went to a conference with Perry Belcher, an AI bot summit, back several months back, and it was the craziest feeling in the world because AI, still a lot of people didn't know about it in the way that they do now. And they were sharing like over 400 different tools you can use in AI. And I literally felt like I was in a room like hearing about the internet for the first time. Like I can't
Yep.
imagine that. Like, can you imagine being a business owner, you're like in the room, like they're talking about .com and internet, and you're just a business owner, entrepreneur, like, oh my God, I'm gonna be able to reach people all around the world. And now I feel like with AI, like a little kid again, like in
Yep.
Disneyland, that's like, wow, like the potential of this is endless. And there's so many systems and processes and bottlenecks, like you mentioned earlier, inside of companies that we're going to be able to create solutions for that we never had the tools to be able to build before in this way.
Dude, I'll give you a good example. Last week, I used ChatGPT just out of curiosity. I need a consulting agreement for myself and a client on a $2.2 million deal where I'm going to get X amount of equity upon exit. I put the numbers in, just one sentence, and it spit out a one-page consulting agreement in perfect legal form. And just had the brackets, like you had to put the company name here, the person's name here, like it had the brackets already set up. I was like, cool. And I'm pretty good at contracts. So I just read through this thing. I was like, dude, this thing's pretty legit. Like this, and it's short and it was concise, one page, had all the details I asked it. It was in there. It showed the equity, everything calculated properly. And so I copy pasted it, put it in a Word document, put the right names in there, and I sent it to my attorney. I said, could you review this to make sure that this looks pretty good before I present it to the client? She looked at it and she's like, yeah, that looks great. Everything looks great on this thing. Like she didn't know a chat GPT wrote that or created that. She just thought I had that maybe on a template and it worked. And so I sent it to the client and I thought maybe he would have some feedback. He had his attorney look at it. And his attorney goes, yeah, everything looks good. Like it's exactly what you guys agreed upon. So he signed it. It had zero revision. Like he just goes, yeah, that looks good. Zero revision. Zero attorney, zero revision, dude. First, I was like, wow. Like, hey, if you're an attorney, I think you should be looking for a separate career. You should be doing something to enhance your skill.
Dude, did you hear that it passed the bar exam?
It passed it, yeah, in every state.
That is crazy to the level. And so when I hear that, like I think people go down the conspiracy route. I'm like, how do we leverage this in business? Because like that's powerful.
I got a seven-figure contract using it on a one-page document. So
And you
there
normally
you go.
would have paid how much to have that drafted? I mean, you still
Probably
would have
about
spent.
1,500 bucks, 1,500 bucks or so. Yeah.
That's insane. So, to the audience listening to this podcast, I always like to inspire the audience. Think about guys how you can leverage this stuff. Think outside the box. It's so new. It's the wild wild west. If you take no code software, artificial intelligence, and no code and robotics, those three things combined together, I truly believe are going to be able to bring solutions to industries that have never existed yet. And being first to market's huge. If you can be first to market with a solution in an industry, we're working on a project for roofing right now. It's not a sexy industry, but we're going to develop something that doesn't exist that the market highly needs. We're going to be the first to market with it. We're going to scale it and we're probably going to exit. What is that for you guys listening to this show? And Tony, if you have anything to riff on that for him too, I love inspiring entrepreneurship ideas.
When it comes to entrepreneurship, I don't like when people think that they need to be a creator. Like a lot of times people that are getting new to the space, they think they have to be an inventor. They have to invent that new app and they have to invent some new product. And that's how I used to think when I was young. I used to think, well, I got to be an inventor. I got to come up with something. Then we read the books like the Blue Ocean Strategy and stuff like that. And yes, all that is true. And yes, there are some big whale hero stories that we've seen because of those inventors that changed the world. Like I get that, but 99% of the businesses that currently exist are just a better variation of something that already existed, or they solved a problem that already existed. that wasn't solved very well by previous products or services. So you don't have to be an inventor. You just have to be very aware and very observant of the things that you interact with on a daily basis, whether that's your apps on your phone or people in public or your sales transactions or your commute, and go, man, what really annoys the shit out of me? Like when I'm doing this app and I'm checking out and this extra thing, it always asks me, like, that's fucking annoying. Like, guys, if you can improve any product or service, usually by 1%, which is not a whole lot, you may have a viable business case. So don't think that you had to be inventing things. Just start looking for things that annoy the crap out of you or the things that could be done better and just go build that.
Yeah, dude, that's actually really good wisdom. Years ago when I was younger, I was probably 17. I was living in South Carolina. I was installing custom underground saltwater swimming pools. We did this beautiful dream home in Oak Island, North Carolina. And I met this guy who owned Computer Warehouse of North Carolina was his company. And I did such a good job. He was just impressed. I was a young, hungry guy. Asked him a lot of questions. And I asked if I could buy him lunch. And I bought him lunch, and he listened to me, and we got to know each other. And he's like, hey, I want to run irrigation for this job. Do you think you could do it? And I was like, I'll figure it out. So I took on this job. I did all his irrigation on my own for this house that took me weeks upon weeks to do. And in the process, part of our agreement was I asked that he goes to lunch with me twice a week so I could just like learn from him. He was very successful. This house was one of the nicest homes I've ever seen in my life. And one of the things he told me, Tony, was that, I was asking him a lot of questions about business. He said, you don't have to invent some new business. He said, all I did is I went and found companies and businesses that other people were already doing well, and I went and did it better. And he's like, I'm on my fifth one now. And I'm like, dang.
Everything.
Good.
I mean, you look at your products, things that are laying around your house, products you buy already, like they didn't invent that most of the time. Like they just revised it is what they did.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, as we wrap up here, because we're at the end of the show, I just would love to know, Tony, what's next for you?
What's next for me? I'm just really focusing on the live events. I mean, we're putting on our 5th event in Portugal. We're going more international and doing things like that. But we're growing the entrepreneurship community. 365 Driven is a community, just like my automotive communities that I've built. And that's what I like to build is these large communities that have a lot of people interacting. It's not about me. It's never about the leader and trying to be like, oh, I'm super awesome and the influencer mindset. I just want to build things for people to create relationships and get some mutual benefits from being around people that with the like-minded, same core values, pushing each other, holding each other accountable. So I'm excited to grow this thing as the rest of my life to be realistic.
Dude, that's amazing. And I know there are people listening to this show wondering how they can connect with you, how they can find out more about 365 Driven, the events that you guys have coming up. Where can they find you at? Can they connect with you?
Keep it simple, 365driven.com, and you'll find all my socials, the book, the podcast, everything's on that one website.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up here, anything else on your heart that you want to leave us with today, Tony?
Man, the big speech that I do on these stages is called the ABC speech. It's ABC is action, belief, and consistency, and that's in the specific order. So action is always first. Belief is second. Most people think they need the belief before they take the action. So maybe you have that self-doubt and you're not taking that action, or you think that you're not good enough, you're not taking that action. You don't think that it's possible, so you're not taking that action, but you're not going to get the belief until you take the action. So that's the trick. So action first, belief comes from the result, like we talked about earlier, and then consistency. Just be there, showing up every single day, putting in the work to get to that goal that you want.
Let's go. ABC, action, belief, consistency. Well, Tony, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this episode. We were honored to have you on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, brother. It was a good conversation.